Hi everyone, this is Dave again from Mountbatten Estates. Today we are interviewing a really good friend of mine, someone who I've known for a good few years now, and someone who is doing some incredible things, raising some really impressive sums of money for developers, all the equity that they need for their developments. So I would like to introduce Des Daly from Daily Equity Connections. Des is also the founder of the Property Investors Golf Society, which was set up a couple of years back now. And effectively, what Des is really good at is connecting people, bringing the money, but more importantly, collectively bringing us together in the form of people who appreciate golf, who want to network over golf, and just have a good time, really. So, Des, I'm going to put it over to you. Kindly introduce yourself, tell everyone who you are, what you do, and let's see where this goes.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for that introduction. So I started in financial services over 40 years ago, working for Legal & General, way back when I was in my early 20s. So I worked for Legal & General for over 17 years. I then became an IFA in 1994. And then over the years, I got very much involved with connecting high net worths with opportunities, financial advice, opportunities. Those days we were using something called self-invested pensions and then SASs. But I soon developed a knack for dealing with high net worth individuals, got involved in film finance and raised a lot of money and actually became a film producer in the film industry, because again, connecting people with money was just tax shelters in those days, and that presented opportunities for high net worths. I then gave that up, did a spot of commercial broking, and then suddenly realized the biggest shortfall was the equity portion. And I found that a lot of my high net worth clients were always looking to invest in property. So I ended up connecting them with the money stack. So I fell into that role, and I've now been doing that for over 15 years.
Brilliant. Des, tell me, what are the common mistakes you often find with developers when they're trying to raise equity? What's the common pitfalls?
Dave, one of the biggest mistakes is that the developers are trying to raise money without really finding out what the investors are looking for. They really need to find out what the investors' attitude to risk is, because it's no good having an investor that you're taking his last 100 grand, or this is the only amount of money that investor has. So it's really, really important for the developer to do a real deep dive into what that investor is looking for, what his attitude to risk is, whether it's short-term money, whether it's high risk, or whether it's a low risk type of money.
I take it you're talking about the SCA 13/3 when it comes to assessing the investor's profile. Are they sophisticated?
Well, that is very important as well, because you must make sure that you actually only approach high net worth investors, sophisticated investors. If you approach retail investors, they're probably not the right sort of investors to have working with yourself. So it's very, very important for the developer to understand those rules. It's a minefield. The compliance aspect of it, if it's done wrong, can actually shut down a developer.
How do you think investors, or actually, how do you think maybe developers can make themselves a little bit more fundable from a lending perspective?
Well, to make themselves more fundable, when they present an application to the broker, they should use a system where they provide as much information to the broker as possible. Provide a complete CV, and that CV should provide information on all of the power team that is looking for the funding. Also provide a detailed analysis with a complete breakdown of all the costs, the purchase price, all of the purchase costs required, all the build costs, and also provide maybe one or two different valuations from the local estate agents on what the estimated GDV should be.
Yeah.
So a complete CV of the team, a complete analysis, and potentially 2 or 3 GDVs based from reputable estate agents in the area.
Okay. And there's been a lot of JVs formed. JVs seem to be something that, I don't know, maybe because of the advent of social media, maybe the breakdown where maybe historically, I mean, from a joint venture point of view, years ago, without social media, I probably would have needed to meet someone 7 or 8, 9, 10 times before I feel comfortable enough to JV with them. Now with social media, because you're on Facebook and you're connected with someone and you see them a few times, people just they jump into bed, don't they? Very easy with joint venture partners. What do you think people need to consider when they're actually thinking of forming a joint venture agreement with someone else?
Dave, I think it's very important that both joint venture parties need to understand the expertise of both individuals to make sure that they're both bringing something which is real value. A typical example is a developer may have got the planning on a project and got the funding, but maybe lacking the full amount of cash required. So the other party may have all the cash, but not the knowledge or the expertise to manage the build. So therefore, you've got 2 people both bringing something really important. So one brings the opportunity with the planning, the other person then brings the cash, or perhaps brings the expertise to make sure that the build is actually how that is managed, to make sure that is actually gone through the whole process. It even maybe can provide the personal guarantees that the other party might not be able to provide.
Good.
And might have all the experience required to make the deal actually happen.
Mm.
The problem is a lot of JVs, people start talking to each other and they don't have the skill set to make that JV work.
So what you're saying is there's still a lack within the JV somewhere. There's some sort of skill set or knowledge or experience or something that's still missing.
That's right. You need to marry up what is required and make sure each party can bring something that the other person can't quite bring. And sometimes you might have a JV where you need 3 people to all have those individual skill sets that is lacking from one of the other 2.
Yeah. Des, I'm seeing and hearing more often that senior lenders are taking an interest in developers' social media presence online. Do you think social media plays an important part when you're looking?
I think it plays a massive part, Dave, because now I think every single senior lender or even an equity partner will actually check out what that other person does on social media. But I think it's also important to have some kind of human element on social media, because everyone knows that people have outside hobbies. And I think it's important to share those outside hobbies as well. It can be all a bit boring if it's all about business all the time. Potentially people might be then hiding things, but I am absolutely convinced that the lenders do check out people's social media platforms. So I think it's a really interesting thing, and it's a very important thing to make sure there's no ridiculous stuff on there that maybe your reunion with all your old university mates where people go out on the lash. It's important to try and keep that off social media.
So you're telling me I need to go back 20 years and delete all those 18 to 30 holidays I had?
Well, I don't think they're actually on Facebook. Facebook's been a relatively new social media platform, but I think more and more people are looking at this type of media. I do know some developers that have people actually running their social media platforms and making sure that the right content is always on there, and making sure nothing doesn't get put on that shouldn't really be on there.
Yeah, good advice. And Des, what kind of costs and contracts would someone need to consider when they're raising finance?
Well, when you're raising finance, a lender could charge you about 2%. When you're raising equity, you could be charged between 2 to 5%, depending on how quickly the funds are raised, or depends. A lot of people have in-house equity fundraisers, and then those figures can then be reduced if someone is working solely for one person. But Dave, you've also got a lot of what we call the soft costs, because soft costs would be the valuations for a development loan. And you can pay as much as £5,000 to have a survey on a commercial loan. And then when you enter into a situation where you get an offer and then you start instructing legals, often you'll end up having to pay for 2 sets of legals.
Yeah.
And those, you could be paying £5,000. So you could, if you're buying a site for about £1 million, and there might be about £1 million of cost, you could end up having to have at least £15,000 to £20,000 as soft costs.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, sometimes these deals get aborted, and you've had to kiss goodbye to that. So it's an expensive business being a developer, raising funds and actually about to complete projects.
It's legal costs, isn't it, in the surveys, and it's sometimes you might need to enhance the drawings and get detailed drawings before
you've got the architect's fees as well.
Yeah, exactly.
The architect's fees, but that's all pre-planning though. So I was really talking about soft costs once you've made an offer and you're about to purchase an actual development.
Yeah. I mean, even the joint venture agreements alone, they can be quite expensive.
That's right, a joint venture agreement. And actually, I should really add that when you enter into a joint venture, one should consider definitely to have a shareholders agreement drawn up.
Des, do you think 100% funding exists still? And if it does, what does it look like?
I do think there is 100% funding out there, but what that normally means is you've still got the soft costs that you're expected to pay. But if you're talking about 100% development finance, often what that means is that the profit on the deal would have to be in excess of over 20% profit on cost, and therefore you've got a senior debt, maybe a bit of what we call mezzanine finance as well, and then the equity portion is then split. The profit that the equity partner would require might be as much as 40 to 50% of the total profit, but you are expected sometimes to put in maybe about 2% of the total equity. However, these days there are lenders that would put the whole lot in, all of the equity, but they would want at least a 50% profit share.
Yeah.
Again, you can structure these because there are what we call a coupon as well. There's some equity partners that would say, we don't want 50% of your money, we want, say, a percentage of like a coupon, maybe 12 to 15% coupon, and then all the profit is yours.
And you can have a mix.
I do believe there are 100% funding out there, Dave. There's definitely 100% funding, but there is still some additional costs that are required to be paid in there.
Can you have a mix of the two, where there's a profit share and a coupon?
Yes, you can. And if you have a coupon, then your profit share could then be something like 75% to the developer and 25% to the investor. But when you've got a coupon of say 10 or 12%, it probably would still equate to a 50-50 profit share, but at least the equity partner is not risking all of his money. So there's some kind of security in there for the equity partner.
Sure. And that coupon, do they want that paid on a month by month? Or would they?
No, it's not. It's not paid on a month by month. So let's say you've got a purchase price and then you've got a bill cost, and you might have, say, £1 million profit. So you've then got the coupon of, say, 12% per annum. So if the deal is 18 months, then you're taking 18% of the profit, and then the balance is then split on an agreed basis, whether that's 75 or 25 or 60-40.
Sure.
All of that can be negotiated.
And what kind of security are equity investors looking for these days?
Well, some equity investors, they don't only want a profit share and a coupon, they want additional security. So they might say, well, have you got equity in your house, for example? We want a second charge on that. And if they're really, really wanting everything, they then might also then want a personal guarantee as well.
Des, can you explain what equitable charge is for everyone? Because this is quite an interesting little thing, and I think you've done it in the past. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Equitable charge.
Okay. So an equitable charge is often a charge that sometimes bridging loan companies, but more and more now equity partners are actually requiring that as additional security. So let's say you've got a first charge commercial lender, and that first charge commercial lender doesn't allow a second charge, but the developer may have a huge big commercial portfolio, and he may have £2 or £3 million worth of equity in his portfolio, and he can't get his further advance from the initial commercial lender. So you can then go to another lender, and then that other lender puts what's called an equitable charge in place. Now, that equitable charge is a charge, but it's not registered. And it will only then get registered if someone perhaps has a lending criteria of saying borrowing the money for 12 months, but after 15 months, they've not paid it back. So at that point, that equitable charge is then put on the main charge and becomes a proper charge. But the equitable charge is in the background. It gives the lender some kind of comfort that anything goes wrong and the developer defaults on the agreement, then they can place that charge on the property.
Brilliant. Good stuff. Tell me a little bit more about disc golf for everyone who hasn't heard of your golf days, because they are legendary.
Basically, the golf has come about, and it came about during lockdown when a lot of us were sitting at home doing Zoom meetings, but we were allowed to actually go out and play golf. So I came up with the idea of bringing a whole group of property professionals together, contractors, architects, surveyors, crowdfunding platforms, and even brokers that came along that could fund 100% development funding. So basically, we've been meeting once a month now, regularly having a game of golf. We have a breakfast, we play 18 holes, and then we have a golf meal afterwards. So in the last 15 months, business has been done on the golf course. JV partnerships have been set up, they've been talked about. And golf is a very relaxing way of getting to know someone, because if you meet someone at a property networking event, you probably only have about an hour chatting to them in the bar. But if you actually play golf with them, you've got a good 5 hours of actually getting to know them. So, you know, you can, in that 5 hours, you can get to know that individual. You can see how he plays golf, see whether he cheats on the golf course, whether he puts his ball in the woods, and then he suddenly appears on the fairway. You get to know how someone plays in life, really. So, you know, and my dad always used to say to me, a lot of business gets done on the golf course. And I think we've experienced that in the last 15 months, where people have got to know each other. People have been coming from as far as Stoke. We've even had our friend Scott Smith coming all the way from
Scotland, wasn't it?
Scotland.
Yeah.
Scott. So yeah, and we've got people coming from Brighton. Phil comes from Stoke, and I think it's something that started during lockdown, and I'm sure he's going to carry on every month. And there's now, as you know, there's plans of potentially us going away when the weather gets a bit too cold in the UK, for us to go for a long weekend and spend a bit of time. So it's all about building friendships and relationships and getting to know each other. And if business can come along as well, that's all fantastic. It's all great.
And this has been quite close to your heart, hasn't it? Because your dad was one of the key players with creating Bletchley, wasn't he, back in the day?
That's right. My dad was a financial advisor as well, and his last business was Bletchley Golf Course. He was one of the founding directors of it. Him and my brother-in-law, they were one of the original two. They were both 25% shareholders. So yeah, that course was built 25 years ago, and for a long time, every single year, I used to just have one event at the course, just to sort of round about the time when he died. So we've just carried on from that, and I think a lot of people have thought that Bletchley was one of the nicest courses we played last year. 100%. So yeah, it's been a passion of mine to sort of carry on what he did. He used to do a lot of playing golf. In fact, funny story, when I was about 12 years old, I used to see him put his golf clubs in the back of his car every day. I said to my mum, what's Dad doing? He's going to work, is he? She said, yeah, he is going to work, but he's playing golf, so that's what he does. So I thought that's quite an interesting thing. When I grow up, I wanted to try and follow his footsteps. That's right. So yeah, that was
brilliant. Well, Des, I'm a testament for your golf days. Everything you said just now is 100% factual and 100% correct. We've met some incredible people who I'm joint venturing on some developments with. I've met a broker who has arranged 100% development finance for one of my developments. I've met some really good investors, and more importantly, I've built a really good professional team around some of the professionals that you've brought on board. So I'll always be an advocate for it. But yeah, it's just good people being brought together by good people doing good business. If that makes sense. So look, there is a bit of a theme to these interviews, which is the last question I always ask the people getting interviewed is, tell me a bit of a crazy story. Tell me something that is either funny or a horror story or something that some of these listeners might appreciate that's happened within the
well, this is an absolute true situation. So about 6 years ago, I started working for a Mayfair developer, a couple of young entrepreneurs that done a lot of training on the progressive type training, and they really took on board permitted development, and they scaled up so big that they kept buying and buying and buying. They were not that great at completing a lot of projects, but they were buying and buying. And then my role there was equity, full-time fundraiser. And we used to every week we'd have our morning meetings at 8 o'clock in the morning, sometimes 7:30 in the morning in Mayfair. And one morning we'd finished the meeting and I got called into the CEO's office, and he turned around and said, look, you've been mucking about raising money for us. You've raised about £1 million, but really I need to test you now, because we're in dire straits of, we need about 3 to 3.5 million quid. And I think I'm going to give you a month to raise that. And I thought, my God, it took me about 18 months to raise 1,500, 1.5 million. And he's now set this task to me. And I thought, oh dear, what am I going to do? Anyway, so lunchtime, I decided to just pop down to the bank. Our office was in Mayfair, and we had a Barclays Bank down below. And I went down there to put some money in, and I was in the queue. And I bumped into someone who was an accountant that worked in that office. He'd been in that office for quite a few years. I'd actually known him for over 20 years. And I knew he had some high net worth. So I knew he looked after some interesting characters, because he had a bit of a shady character himself. And I then said to that gentleman, look, I know this is a tall order, but I need 3.5 million quid. Any other clients got that? I think we can pay you 20% per annum on that money. And he just looked at me, laughed, and he said, well, if you pay me 24% and we get, we being him, get a good fee, and I think he charged about 4%. And he shook my hand there and then. And I literally went back upstairs, which was actually only 3 hours after I was told your job's on the line if you don't go out and raise some money. And I just said, look, all those people I've been running around and speaking to around the country, I've just met an accountant that's 3 floors below us. If you let me and the CFO go down and talk to him, I think we can pull this deal off. And that was probably in September. And I know that about the first week in December that year, we got 3.5 million from him. So that's probably one of the most craziest stories about how I managed to raise 3.5 million. It took a bit of time with legals, and his fee was quite a lot, but it ended up being worth it because it actually saved that developer from losing an opportunity that they built, got the planning from 18 apartments to nearly 90 apartments, but they were very slow in completing the build. So it saved them. Brilliant. So that's my funny story, an actual factual story.
Brilliant. I'm well impressed, Des. And to be fair, I'm not surprised. I've met some of your contacts, and they are high level contacts that you have. So all I can say is if anyone's got a half decent handicap and they fancy coming out and having a good laugh, there's some really good people on the golf course, and I'm sure Des would be more than happy to introduce some of his contacts to you. So Des.
Well, Dave, they actually don't need to be decent players, do they? Because a lot of people started as beginners, and now they've sort of developed into learning a bit more on the golf course. So we had the beginner group, and now we've sort of amalgamated that into one group.
Yeah. So Des, tell me, who are you looking to connect with, and how can people connect with you?
Well, I have a website, which is www.dailyequityconnections.com. I'm quite visual on Facebook because all of my events are on Facebook, and my contact details are on Facebook. The sort of individuals I'm looking for is quality developers that are looking to connect with opportunities, or maybe not quite so experienced developers that are looking to scale up. Because one of the things I'm able to do is to bring every single aspect of the property network to an individual that's looking to find investors as well. And then finding investors sometimes is not a quick process. Last year, I got asked to raise £1 million of equity, and it was a 3-month process. But I helped that developer scale up, brought in an accountant that actually turned his business into a very investable business. And actually, we got the money from actually one of my golfers. But we helped that developer scale up to get to a position where his business was very investable. And that can be, that can't happen overnight sometimes.
True.
It can take a while, not just to build the social media profile. And incidentally, that developer didn't have a proper website.
Really?
So we had to get that website organized for him. And that was done by another one of our golfers' wives, funny enough.
Brilliant. And without mentioning any names, this developer, he actually had quite a decent track record, didn't he? He had built up quite a substantial amount of properties.
Yeah, he was an architect.
Yeah.
And he opened a hotel last year as well in London Bridge.
Yeah.
And he had a very good track record. And he's always thought outside the box. I'd actually known him for over 18 years. And always thought outside the box, sold his buy-to-let portfolio in 2014, but started moving into commercial assets. And he got into the commercial space.
Brilliant. Des, we will leave it on that note. I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation today. I've genuinely learned a lot. And hopefully the people watching this have learned quite a bit when it comes to raising equity and the hoops and hurdles you might need to go through. I will actually put Des's website just underneath the video for you to be able to click and go direct to Des and make contact that way. But Des, thank you so much. Really, really enjoyed our conversation today, and looking forward to seeing you on the golf course pretty soon.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks
My
a lot.
pleasure. Best of luck. Speak to you soon.
Thank you.